You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. Just go to Indeed.com/PODKATZ12 right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/kidsandfamily. Just go to Indeed.com/kidsandfamily right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
I've been writing about and investigating UFOs for well over 20 years, and most of that time I've been employed full-time to do that work. I've written dozens of articles, I've been on many UFO programs, and I'm often interviewed by news outlets. Claims from credible witnesses of incredible things have inspired me to keep an open mind to the extraordinary possibilities when it comes to the nature of UFOs, often referred to as UAP when it comes to scientific investigation. The goal of this podcast is to provide credible news and information to ground this cosmic conversation. Welcome to Open Mind UAP News. My name is Alejandro Rojas, and I'll be your host at Open Mind UAP News. Some of you may have been longtime listeners to the show. In fact, we launched this show probably 13, 15 years ago, something like that. And I've got exciting news. On the next episode, my co-host from the original Open Mind UAP News, Jason McClellan, will be joining us on the next episode. The format for this show going forward will be to go over the latest UFO news. We'll have a guest, or I'll go over some information. In fact, on this episode, I'm going to kind of ground us on what is the status of things, how do we move forward, what I think is important moving forward, and what you can expect from this show. The last segment of each episode, we'll look at some videos where we either can't explain what it is, and it's kind of an educational moment for all of us for what's going on in our skies, or more exciting, perhaps some videos at least that I can't explain that either you can help me with, or perhaps we'll just go unexplained, and that's exciting. That's what we're looking for. Most of these videos will come from the Enigma app. It's an app where you can report UFO sightings. And what's cool is because it's app-based, we're getting a lot of videos. I work with Enigma as a consultant, and every day I look at the cool videos that are coming across. So that's why I have all these videos to look at. And of course, I think, as I'll review momentarily, that, when it comes to this topic, one of the most important things we can do is try to use sensor data, such as the data we get through our phones, to get that data analyzed, and then hopefully, get scientific analysis and papers written so we can have a consensus among the scientific community that at least one of these cases is truly anomalous. But first, let's go ahead and get into the news. I do want to inform people that if you're not following Open Minds on social media, you should. Because if you see here on the right, you're going to see our Facebook posts, and these are all the latest breaking news on UAP, updated on a nearly daily basis. But let's get into it. This is a new paper that just came out on Nature. Really important. Nature is one of the most respected scientific journals. And this one is about UFOs, not necessarily in the light that many of us want to see it. But I wanted to review this news because I think it's really important, because this kind of sets the tone for the show that and as people know, my perspective, but it gives us more guidance on how to be careful and credible and make sure that we're sticking to science, so we're not just creating more conspiracies based off of bad information. That really doesn't help anything. It doesn't help us get to the truth. It just keeps us chasing our tails. So we're not focused on gathering real data to really understand what's going on with this phenomena. This paper is, of course, titled Exploring Expert Figures in Alien-Related UFO Conspiracy Theories. And they kind of review how these conspiracies theories get created. But the beginning of this paper goes over the whole idea of conspiracies altogether. For example, 9/11 conspiracies. In particular, it goes over conspiracies such as vaccines. It talks about how scientists and, the belief of individual scientists is kind of conflated to verify scientifically some point of view, or papers that just have zero credibility being touted as science when they're not. The idea of autism being created by vaccines as an example of that. And yes, we're going to be looking at real science here, not conspiracy theories, popular ideas. We're going to be looking at the data, and the data shows that that's not the case. But a paper written by some non-credible people got out, and it gets touted as science when it's not. And of course, that happens in this field a lot. The other thing that this paper goes over is scientific validation versus consensus. And you often hear me talking about that. Just because a scientist comes out and says they believe X, Y, or Z, it doesn't verify the phenomena that they're referring to. When we're talking about science and really understanding, we're talking about a consensus among the scientific community. So what we have to do as a UFO community, or those interested in UAP, and going forward, I'll use that term mostly, which kind of essentially it really means the same thing as UFO, but these days is looked upon as kind of the credible or scientific investigation of UFOs. But a consensus is what we're looking for. So what you want is a paper to be written. You want a community of scientists to look at it and to agree or to argue and debate it back and forth to be able to get to some sort of consensus. That's the goal, not just having one person here or there. And when it comes to UFOs, a lot of times you have scientists that are talking about fields that they don't really have expertise in and trying to make claims about these things. So this kind of goes over that. Some of the other things that it goes over.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/kidsandfamily. Just go to Indeed.com/kidsandfamily right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. Just go to Indeed.com/PODKATZ12 right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Is looking at social media, they found that there was a big problem with conspiratorial communities, especially UFO communities, sowing distrust in authorities. Something that I've always talked against, that I think is really dangerous and unwarranted. In my experience, I seek to work with authorities to see what they have to say. We'll interview people who are in positions of authority and in that they work for institutions that are credible. I've always sought to do that and get their insight. In my experience, these people are very genuine. They're looking for answers. They're devoted to looking for answers. They're not, prone to at least wanting to just kind of make information out there and push an angle without that evidence. It also talks about the urgent need for enhanced scientific literacy and critical thinking, something I think is absolutely necessary, a very important point. And that's kind of the whole point of this show, is to try to educate ourselves, to enhance our scientific literacy so we understand what science is and how things work and why, there's a perspective that you may not understand, and also critical thinking, as opposed to just kind of going with whatever is popular out there, using your brain, to try to suss out the real kind of meaty information. That's the perspective that we're going to be looking at. And when I get into my talk in just a little bit, I'll go over more of how that works specifically for what's going on in the UFO community and how that's important. But I think this paper is really, really good. I think it's great. It doesn't really talk about the evidence or whether UFOs are a thing or what they might be. It's more talking about how alien-related UFO conspiracies start and get spread. All right, next. So getting into some of what's out there, and kind of an example here is some of the news that is coming from the media on this event. So here is Jeremy Corbell. I've interviewed him many times. Of course, he goes way back with Open Minds, but we always don't necessarily agree on things. And that's certainly the case here, where they're putting out this new video saying that it's an unidentified Tic Tac object, that it was off the coast of California in 2023 when this occurred. I'm going to go back so we can look at the object a little more and freeze frame on it. And the reason being that, so this object looks like a Tic Tac in this video. But there's a problem and something that gets lost in this messaging. And this is where it's really difficult and unfortunate, the way a lot of these people are putting this information out. And it doesn't help the situation. In fact, it hurts it many times. And what I mean by that is, this is a FLIR video. We should by now start to educate ourselves and know something about FLIR. FLIR is forward-looking infrared radar. What that means is that this is a camera that's looking for heat signatures. In this case, you have a tic-tac shaped or an oblong heat signature. That is not an object. And that's what's really unfortunate. For people like Jeremy and others to go out and say this is a tic-tac object is completely inaccurate. We know this because we've looked at different cases. In fact, there's some clear cases that I think are mysterious and great, and we'll review those over time. We have in the past. But, we've got to make sure we know what we're looking at to understand the sensor data that we're analyzing. In this case, this is only a heat signature. There's no indication here at all that we can see the actual shape of the physical object. So we don't know if that's a tic tac shaped object. And it's inaccurate to go out and say it is a tic tac shaped object when we just don't have that information with this video alone. The other thing with this video is that it just doesn't show the object doing anything anomalous. So it comes down to, and we'll hear this a lot, a lack of data. We don't really have enough data to show what's going on with whatever this object is, let alone to say that it's something anomalous or, something that could not or is not man-made. Another problem with this news story is that there are a lot of alleged witnesses who saw this or that. And going forward, I'm not going to be covering a lot of whistleblowers and people, unidentified people saying this or that, because it's not reliable information. What can you do with that? We've been getting that for decades. That's what I've been covering and writing about, and it gets us nowhere. So I'm, this obviously, I'm very critical of this situation. I think it's great that these guys are out there taking an interest in this and looking for data and collecting this data, but I wish they'd be a little bit more disciplined about how they release this data. I'll be going over more about this in detail in just a minute. Another case that's out there, and I should back up a bit because I don't have it on here, but there was a group called the Skywatchers. They also have released some videos lately, but I've released a video, and I'll put a link to it up here on the top 10 Enigma videos that we received, according to me, in 2024. And I feel that our videos are more interesting than what the Skywatchers got. Of course, we're collecting videos that people are recording mostly with their phones. That's what they got. The problem is that I think that they're just a little newer to this, so they are mistaking balloons and other things for UAP. The other thing that they do is that they say that they try to psychically call in aliens and then they get these objects. That's been going on for a long time too. I'll do a video in the future here where I'll attempt to do that. But here's my prediction, because this is what I've experienced myself going out in the field many, many times to look for UAP, is that when you go out and you meditate, you see things in the sky. You see planes or balloons or things that you can't understand that you record and can look like what the Skywatchers got, or that we get at Enigma a lot of times. You can also go out there and not meditate and get the same thing, still get odd, strange things. So I just don't feel that the meditation or the psychic connection has been established. I think what I just described is a sort of work where you have a control and then you do your experiment, is where you can kind of validate that sort of thing. That's really kind of how science works. So I wish, although these people are kind of espousing to do science, that they would do that sort of thing to verify whether there's some veracity to what they're saying. This is the kind of thing we should be doing. Here's a paper in Science Alert, an article. Infrared AI camera proposed to scan Earth skies for signs of alien visitors. In fact, that's what my talk is going to be about, why this is the sort of thing we should do. We need to gather data. If we don't have enough data, if all of these cases come down to a lack of data, then obviously we need to gather more data. How do we do that? We put out there more sophisticated technology, sensors. So in this case, they are using what others are using out there. And I'm going to review some of the programs that are out there that are similar. But this one they call Dalek, because their system that they've created looks like a Dalek from Doctor Who. But what they have is a system where they have an all-sky camera, a bunch of other cameras, a bunch of other sensors that are detecting a bunch of information about UAP. So they can deploy these things and then hopefully capture something. And when they do, they've got a lot more telemetry than just the video. As it says here, it's multimodal, it's multi-spectrum, it's ground-based. And this is another great point. And this is kind of frustrating because it's a preview of what I'm going to be reviewing with you all later. But Avi Loeb says here, often the U.S. government data is classified either because it was collected by classified censors or because it is not fully understood and could potentially be relevant for national security. When in doubt, they decide not to release data. Avi Loeb is a professor at Harvard who is actually in charge of the Galileo Project, which is the group that is putting this together. Incidentally, next month, I will be on a panel at Arizona State University with Avi Loeb, Mick West, and Link Katai, and we'll be talking about this sort of thing. But I agree with them 100%. If they're not going to give us data, then we've got to go out there and get the data ourselves. And so that's what this is about, is them deploying a new system. So a really great article. And this is a direction that we need to go. Next, an ad. All right, let's see what's here. Here's more science, and I love this. UFOs in space. Is it possible to launch a flying saucer into space and return it to Earth? And what he's talking about is the shape. A saucer, is that really a shape that is conducive to flying around in our atmosphere or in space? He analyzes different projects that are similar to disks, and he talks about, acceleration, whether or not it's a shape that kind of lends itself to being able to provide lift, that sort of thing. So it's a very interesting article, something that I think would be interesting for everybody to look at. But this is a great one. This is just from today, or actually this video is going to launch tomorrow. So this is from Wednesday. So a really exciting piece of news that came forward, and this is scientists hail the strongest evidence so far for life beyond our solar system. So an astrophysicist team say observation of chemical compounds may be the tipping point in search for extraterrestrial life. So the James Webb Telescope is able to look at planets at vast distances, and they can use different things such as the coloring and other things to detect like what sort of gases are in the atmosphere. In this case, this planet is called K2-18b. Hopefully they come up with a more fun name than that. This planet is showing possibilities of having gases that are similar to ours. They call it a chemical fingerprint, similar to those on Earth that have produced life. So they're saying that this right now is the best evidence that there could be life out there, extraterrestrial life. I think this is really important because if scientists, whether that be on Mars, the moon, or K2-18b, I think if they discover even microbes or the possibility that life did exist on another planet, that's going to be really important. I think if people discover, hey, there actually is some life out there, then it will lend people to think, well, how advanced is that life? Where else can that life be? And I hope that will also try to begin to invigorate people to, or begin to influence people to do more research into UFOs and UAP and investigate those the way that Avi Loeb and Galileo are and other organizations, or the way that I'm kind of going to be proposing here coming up in just a minute. So this is really exciting news. However, you always need to temper your expectations when it comes to science or otherwise. If you hear things that are too good to be true, especially in UFOs, it's most likely they are not only too good to be true, unfortunately, sometimes they're just flat out lies. In this case, the NPR story's title is this a hunt for life on another world or just a lot of hot air? The article is similar to other articles that are coming out in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. So lots of really important news outlets are covering this story. But this one, they're also saying, this isn't completely confirmed. So hold on. We're still doing work to confirm this. But if we can confirm this, it's going to be really exciting. And it does bring me to a quote one of the scientists said. She said, this is one of those cases where extraordinary claims are going to require extraordinary evidence. And we may know that there are some people, especially in the UFO field, who don't like that saying. They're like, that's not how science works. Science doesn't require extraordinary evidence. I completely disagree. And plus, you're looking at the term extraordinary. The idea that life is out there and we can confirm it, I think that's extraordinary. So, any evidence we're going to have to that end is going to be extraordinary, kind of by nature. But let's even back up a little bit and say, well, why do certain categories of scientific discovery need more evidence than others? Well, remember, we're getting back to this scientific consensus. Scientists don't want to be wrong. And, there are times where we get really excited about something that could be extraordinary, and then turns out to be wrong. And that's a huge letdown, and it can be really damaging to that field of study. So you always need to temper expectations, and you need to be really, really sure. So in this case, they are going to be looking for more evidence and for this extraordinary claim. It's just the way it goes. If you're looking for a scientific consensus, we're all humans, you're going to need some extraordinary evidence. Sorry, that's the nature of things, but it's probably better it's that way, because if we go off of bad information, we can make big mistakes, and we don't want to be doing that. We need to confirm these sort of extraordinary possibilities. So that's the news for this week. Exciting stuff. For all of these news items, if there's any updates, I'll be sure to be letting you know in future episodes. And I'll bring on some people, friends and researchers, to talk about some of that news, and experts that have something to do with that news that we're reviewing, including people from Galileo or otherwise. But next, let's get into my presentation. So this presentation I actually delivered at Phoenix MUFON last week, and I really kind of felt that it was a good outline for my perspective, looking for some common ground and looking for opportunities where we don't have to sit and wait for others to do the work and hopefully come up with something, and we can do it ourselves. So I called this UFO videos and the need for UAP data collection and analysis. The UFO video part, I reviewed some really cool Enigma videos that we got. A lot of those you can see in that top 10 video I talked about earlier. But I will also, after we're done with this, we'll end with reviewing some cool Enigma sightings. So stay tuned for that. But let's take a look here. First of all, who am I? Just in case you're tuning into this new, if you're from the Den of Geek group, Den of Geek is now sponsoring. I'm partnering with them on this podcast. So if you're new to my show, who am I? I am the host, of course, of Open Minds UAP News. I'm an editor and webmaster at openminds.tv. I'm a consultant for Enigma Labs, the app that we got these videos on that we'll be looking at later. I'm also the founder of UAP Discovery, a 501c3, and I'll be talking more about what we do there in just a minute. And I'm a blogger and freelance journalist. So I've been writing about this topic for a long time. I've also been writing about science and sci-fi, a lot of that on Huffington Post, and much of it also on Den of Geek and others. Also, formally, some of the stuff that I've done in the past is I've been the director of education and a spokesperson for the Mutual UFO Network, their headquarters. Also, I was a host and coordinator of the International UFO Congress. Maybe some of you got to go to that, but that was kind of old school, one of the bigger conferences. And a lot of people say one of the best UFO conferences in the past. And that's me and my dog. Like I said, I'm on a lot of television shows. I've been on Ancient Aliens quite a bit. And one of the last times I was on, I brought my dog because he was really old, and they were really cool about it. And they were like, hey, bring him on set so we could get a picture and everything. And that's what this is. So that was a lot of fun. I love how the backgrounds of the slide kind of fit the background of the show. It's kind of funny, not intended. But the point that I really want to make, and this is what my point is. A lot of people think that I'm kind of naysaying and I'm saying, oh, these people are coming up with bad stuff, or their stuff is no good or whatever. I'm not necessarily saying that. What I'm saying is that, ufology, the search for the meaning behind UFOs or what's going on with UFOs, its biggest asset is you. You can do something. You can do more than just listen to podcasts. You can do more than just, get on social media and hopefully are not fighting with people like crazy, because that's what social media unfortunately has turned into. Stop that. It's not helping anything. What we need to do is work together, and you need to hit the ground and do what you can do to figure out what's going on. I like to say this, and of course, this is to a local MUFON group, which is a pretty big group, but I've been, speaking to this group for a very long time. But I talked to them, we were here before UFOs were cool, and we'll be here even if it fades from public attention again. And that goes for me too. I've been doing this a long time. A lot of us have. Some of you who listen to my show and are longtime listeners, you know that. We've been here a long time. We're going to be here a long time. We've seen a lot of people come to this topic recently and then leave. And then whenever there's a new news cycle, there's a bunch that come and they get all rowdy and crazy about something. And then when they get disappointed, they all leave. But a lot of us are going to be here for a while. And what I'm going to be sharing with you are learnings from just, doing this for such a long time, and the type of things I see. And this is why I say, temper your expectations, because I've been hearing disclosures around the corner, for years. For literally every year, there's somebody, a big name in the UFO world, disclosures around the corner. I've got a anonymous witness who says this or that, and nothing comes of it. And I know a lot of you have gotten frustrated lately because, we got all this big news and there are these big, whistleblowers coming out and saying we're going to find this and that, and nothing's come of it. No surprise to me. That's why people got frustrated with me when I'm like, hey guys, chill out. I'm skeptical anything's going to happen. And it didn't. But people got frustrated with me kind of sharing that expectation. And I'm glad I tempered my expectations and didn't get myself excited about any of this, because I learned the hard way. Getting really excited and let down is no fun. But if you temper your expectations, focus on the road ahead, we can make some progress. But let's look at some of the areas where information could come from, or where people are expecting information to come from. And I'll kind of review, some of the aspects of this information that I think people aren't paying as close attention to as maybe they should. So for example, OSAP and the UAP task force. So who's that? Well, that New York Times article in 2017 that came out and kind of blew up everything, that the government had a secret program that was looking into UFOs. Even though that article was wrong, and it said the name of that program that received all that money was ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, that wasn't the name. That was actually a nickname for the bigger group. It said this group was some kind of official secret UFO program. That wasn't true. Most of this article was really, really off. The actual program's name was OSAP, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Application Program. And what this program was built to do on its face was to analyze weapon systems, theoretical science and weapon systems that could be created and deployed by our enemies, or perhaps something that we could deploy. Had nothing to do with UFOs. How do I know this? Go look at the contract. Go look at, much of the information out there, including the members of this group who said we wanted it to look like it was kind of this mundane theoretical science research sort of group or project, when actually we were going to take that money and go look at UFOs. Harry Reid and other senators put their blessing. They put this together. They were part of this whole plan. Even Robert Bigelow, a Nevada real estate tycoon who's really into the paranormal and has funded different paranormal programs for a long time. He owned famously the Skinwalker Ranch. He's the one who started investigating that. Of course, there's a big History Channel show on that where there's all this paranormal stuff happening. That's where this all comes from. These guys decided, hey, we want to investigate all of this weird paranormal stuff at Skinwalker Ranch that we think that we're seeing, and UFOs. But when they put together this program, it was under the guise that it was not a UFO research group. The other problem, of course, Skinwalker's weird. They wanted to do all this weird paranormal research stuff. But another member, the head scientist, his name was Hal Puthoff. Now, Hal Puthoff was the guy who helped create remote viewing, which is essentially a psychic kind of law enforcement technique or intelligence gathering, where with the CIA and the Stanford Research Institute, they developed this program where they felt they could teach these remote viewers how to look for stuff and find, solve crimes, solve cold cases. They claim that they did solve some cases. I've interviewed, in my huge archives of previous versions of this very show, Joe McGonigal and others who were involved with that program. Joe McGonigal was supposedly the most prolific or the best at it, and he said he was only right 20% of the time. It doesn't sound like much, and it doesn't sound like much more than chance. And some people will argue it wasn't more than chance. But either way, this is weird stuff. This is weird, fringy stuff. Now, I say this having spent many, many years defending this group and defending their work, because Robert Bigelow, for the longest time in the UFO field, was the bad guy. Everybody loved to hate him. Everybody loved to hate these guys. They're government. They're lying to us. They're the secret keepers. All of this kind of thing. But I knew all those guys. I've interviewed them. I've worked with them. And although I do not agree with their findings, I do agree that I don't agree that they can prove anything that they say is existing. They don't have findings. They have stories, and they have things that they say allegedly happen, and they say we can prove this or that, but they don't. But my point was, let them do their thing. I think it's great that they're out doing the research. I wish that they would temper expectations. Their big thing is to overpromise and underdeliver. Same goes with, I would have to say Jeremy Knapp, Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp kind of are in that group where, a lot of big promises, and they don't give us the full story. They often gloss over and spin these stories. What do I mean by that? We could get into more detail, but I won't want to bum you guys out too much. But stories like Bob Lazar, who has a history of lying and criminality, and for some reason, they don't cover any of that, which speaks to the credibility of this one sole witness who claims that he saw aliens at Area 51. Interestingly, he said this after some guy who worked for the Air Force, and we'll go over this in a minute, said he was spreading disinformation. And he said this for the very first time on live TV, that there's aliens at Area 51, and they took this Roswell crashed alien spacecraft to Area 51 where aliens took over the base and were battling people, all this crazy stuff this guy says on TV, which he says is disinformation. His claim. Within weeks, Bob Lazar is out there claiming that, oh yeah, I worked at Area 51 on these spacecraft and with these aliens, and talked about all these alien embattles and stuff. Information he's walked back since. It's just not very credible or substantial information. And I'm rooting for these guys. I want them to find answers, but they haven't. Like I say here, anomalies confirmed, 0. They have not confirmed anything. And I do want to back up to that last bullet point real quick. When it comes to government confusion about OSAP and ATIP, them claiming, oh, they did look at UFOs. They didn't look at UFOs. They weren't an official group. They did look at UFOs. And the government admits that. And this is where people get confused, because there's nuance here. They looked into UFOs, but they weren't supposed to. This wasn't an official UFO research group, which makes that New York Times even more wrong. This was a advanced aerospace weapons application project where they were looking into advanced weapon systems. But behind the scenes, they were looking into UAP. That's the confusion. And this is where people get mixed up. So it's absolutely accurate when the government says, and at least what I'm speaking to is the evidence we have right now. We have no evidence. If you look at the contract and the paperwork, this wasn't a UFO program. It was on the back end. People didn't know about it. And that's kind of difficult too, because it's disingenuous disingenuous for someone to say, oh, I was hiding from the government when I was working on a government program, that I was working on UFOs. I was telling the government I was working on these advanced weapon systems papers. And then later on, when the government says, you weren't looking into UFOs in that program, we didn't tell you to do that, to say, oh, you're lying, I was too. That's silly. You were the one hiding that information, and now you're blaming the government for not knowing that. Finally, the UAP task force. The UAP task force was, obviously, it's in their name, an official program to look into UFOs. Most of the members of the or I shouldn't say that because I don't know that for sure, but many of the primary members of the UAP task force, including the head of the UAP task force, worked with Robert Bigelow on Skinwalker and other places with OSAP. The head scientist for the UAP task force is now the lead scientist on the Hunt for the Skinwalker television show on the History Channel. So, they're totally connected, and they're still chasing this weird paranormal stuff. But this is what's really interesting. The UAP task force were the first to write an official paper on the state of UAP for the government. And their conclusion was, when it comes to aliens, we don't have enough data to prove what's going on. This is difficult because now these people are coming out and saying, we know it's aliens. And I think that they're speaking about their own personal experiences, which is completely fair. Who am I to say that their personal experiences didn't really happen? I don't know. Maybe they did. And that's probably what's driving them. A lot of these people in this kind of bucket on the left that I'm talking about have had personal experiences that we can't verify, where they felt that they've had, interactions with wolfmen and dino beavers famously, and being abducted by aliens or whatnot. I can't say whether or not that has occurred or not. I personally find these guys that I've worked with, I like these guys. I think they're, their heart's in the right place for the most part, as far as I know, that they're just trying to investigate and prove something that they think is real. But my point is, we have to be careful about the way we go about that. And I think this was an absolutely accurate statement when these guys admitted they don't have enough data to say it's aliens or what it is. Arrow. This is the latest version of a UAP research group that for the Defense Department. This is the All Domain Anomaly Research Office. All domain meaning that, and this was an important point because, there was some stonewalling coming across where they were saying, we want to look at UAP. What about what's going on in space? And being told, well, UAP means unidentified aerial phenomena. So space is not aerial. It's not in the air. So that's none of your business. Congress made it very specific that UAP means unidentified anomalous phenomena, and that includes objects from every domain and transmedium objects, meaning that the domains of the atmosphere, space, water, those are the separate domains. Transmedium meaning objects that then go in between all of those domains. So objects that go from the air into the water, or from the water into the air, or from the air into space, or maybe all of those things. So that's why the all domain is in there. What has Arrow said? Arrow has said UAP are real. They're a real phenomena and something that we should take seriously. People who say that Arrow says UAP are false, even Congress members, like in the House, people who are part of these disclosure groups who are supposed to be leading the UFO field on all of this, Congressman Luna, are saying things like, Arrow says UAP are not real. That's not true. And you're not educating yourself on the very topic that you're trying to champion here. No, aliens are separate from UAP. UAP is unidentified anomalous phenomena, and Arrow is very clear that they are real. Aliens, however, is what they say they don't have enough data for. just like the UAP task force. So they agree that we don't have enough data to say that aliens are involved. Arrow also was supposed to come up with a historical report when they got into the history of UAP, such as Blue Book. I think that's a complete fail. That part of their report was really kind of littered with errors and things that were wrong. I think that they need to take another look at that and clean that up, because I don't think that was an accurate representation of what was going on historically. I think that, there was seemingly kind of some whitewashing. When it comes to Blue Book, they got mostly military cases. They had 20,000 cases. There were 700 cases when Blue Book closed in 1969 that they could not explain. And this is after thorough investigation where they felt they did have information. 700 cases. These are really good cases of military people, police, law enforcement having, multiple people, law enforcement chasing objects over several counties. These are really good cases. And this is what I mean. And actually, this term was used by the Air Force when there was an incursion over Washington, D.C., an airport in Washington, D.C., having on several occasions UFOs flying over the airport and jets coming in and chasing them away, or really not chasing them away. The jets say we were outclassed by what was ever flying out there, just like our jet pilots have said more recently. That's very credible stuff. That warrants this worth a look. And I think that it's unfortunate that, about more recent cases, they say, hey, this makes it worth a look. A lot of this historical cases make it that way too. However, when they did review the history of OSAP and this alleged Project Kona that never went anywhere because they didn't have any of the alleged, again, this OSAP group that did not provide the evidence that they claim to have. And that's really frustrating. Imagine, and this is where it creates a lot of this friction. Quit claiming things you don't have. Why do that? I don't understand. Just do your analysis, do some real regular science and say, hey, it doesn't indicate this, but it does indicate this. Here are some possibilities, instead of sexing it up and sensationalizing and saying, we've got this, we've got that, and then it not turning out to be the case. Stop it, and that's what happened. They said, oh, we've got evidence of materials of from extraterrestrial spacecraft or unknown craft. And sure enough, they didn't. And then OSAP, this whole history I reviewed, where they even say, OSAP was not tasked to look into UFOs and paranormal things, but the DIA agent who was in charge of the program allowed them to and participated in doing that stuff. And so they did it, and that's what happened. The historical, so that part of the report I think is accurate and I've got firsthand experience with a lot of that. At least I saw a lot of this happening in real time. And, we've been able to examine the paperwork. So far, what they've said seems to be accurate when it comes to the more recent contemporary side of that report. The older stuff was really bad. The historical report is also incomplete. It was due completely on June 2024. So far, they submitted part 1, but we have no idea when they're going to do part 2. That's important because there should be some other interesting information in part 2, and I'll look at that in a second. But my point being here is that, well, let me get into the next screen. What if either of these groups actually do find something? Well, just like Jeremy released today or this week or others, what is everybody going to say? You got any proof? That's what people should say. Prove it. And I don't think any of us are going to take anybody's word for it. Certainly the scientific community isn't going to say, okay, Arrow, you say you've got evidence of something anomalous. Show it, prove it. So you're going to have proof. You're still going to need to do the science. But what can the government responsibly share? Should we expect anything from the government? And this is where we talked about this earlier, and Avi Loeb had a great quote in that article earlier. No, I don't think, but look at, when I say responsibly, let's say that you are in the government. So if you come across a object that you don't know what it is, an aircraft or some sort of craft or technology, that's going to go into the foreign technology division, which is where it's supposed to go, where they analyze it, try to figure out whose it is. But maybe even more importantly, and I've interviewed people in defense who say what takes priority over figuring out whose it is how do we build this ourselves? How do we back engineer this? And how do we take this technology and exploit this technology as much as we can ourselves to enhance our technology? If you're part of an organization doing that, how do you responsibly say something you don't know what its origins is not Chinese or Russian or not, an enemy uh, of ours? It would be difficult and impossible to say that. So can they responsibly even give us information without, tipping their hand or giving classified information? It makes it really difficult for the government to share information. And I don't expect that we will see much from them. And to be honest, we haven't seen anything from them. All of these videos that they've been analyzing have been retrieved they've been leaked. They've been either leaked by the OSAP group or one of them was leaked to some researchers I was working with. The most recent analysis they did on the Agua de Puerto Rico case, that was leaked from Homeland Security. These are leaked cases. So they're not sharing anything as is. They're just looking at stuff that's already been leaked. And I don't expect them to share anything. In fact, the PR person for the DoD, when it comes to UAP, Susan Goff, has said that they are not incumbent to share anything that they're working on or their findings, and they do not plan to share anything. So I don't think we're going to see much there. The other difficult part is disinformation. This is something I harp on a lot and will continue to harp on. And Congress mandated that in the Arrow report, they include disinformation, any instances where the U.S. government actively obfuscated or, put out bad information about UFOs. And Arrow needs to address that. It's very important. And I've got cases where there is something there. There's something to write about here. In fact, the CIA wrote a paper in the 90s about how they spread disinformation about UFOs in the past. So the CIA was working with the Air Force when they were working on Project Blue Book and investigating UFOs, but they didn't want the public to know about it. So they lied to the public about it. And they asked the Air Force to lie about it as well. When it came to the U-2 space aircraft, which was created by Lockheed Skunk Works, which is what was actually going on at Area 51 in the 50s, the U-2 started to be tested in the late 50s. And when it was tested, this was a spy plane that was flying really high with camera systems that could take pictures of like Russian assets without the Russians being able to send missiles that high to take it down. Eventually, they did develop them and famously shot one down and captured a pilot. But the CIA had lied about this. And when U-2s were seen by commercial airliners, because commercial airliners are like, hey, I see something really high up there. What is that? And they'd be like, oh, report it to Blue Book. It's a UFO. They wanted people to think it was a UFO. Like I said, the CIA had the U.S. Air Force also lie. But in this report that the CIA wrote, where they reviewed all of this history of their deception, they concluded that all of this made everything worse. They should have just told the truth about it. Eventually, researchers started to realize the CIA was involved. The Robertson panel, for example, was a CIA group that people knew met to talk about UFOs, but the CIA kept denying it. So it was really silly. More and more people started to realize that the CIA was involved, yet they kept denying it. And sure enough, created a bunch of conspiracy theories and just made the situation worse, as this paper concluded. The other thing, and this is something that I cover quite a bit that you can find on Open Minds, and I will continue to cover because I really think the Air Force needs to answer to this, is another disinformation situation, which is Richard Doty. Richard Doty worked for the U.S. Air Force Office of Special Investigations in the 80s at Kirtland Air Force Base. During this time, according to him, he was putting out disinformation, false information. That information included things like there were aliens at Area 51, that there was this group Majestic 12 that was hiding all of the secrets. Sorry, people, these are total BS. They were made up by Richard Doty, enforced by people like Bob Lazar, who lied about it and created these fantasies about it. This is all well documented. I've got articles on Open Minds. You can find, I think, a link even on the front page to my open letter to the Air Force about this, because he was really committing crimes and saying that he did this at the behest of this DIA agent called Falcon. Interesting enough, in that television show that I told you about earlier, where Doty actually went on television and spouted all this crazy stuff, aliens like strawberries, there's aliens and battling the military at Area 51 and all this crazy stuff. He said this on TV while he was anonymous and he was blacked out and he was using the name Falcon. How do I know for 100% it was Doty? Go on IMDb right now. Look up this 1989 television show, UFOs Live, and you'll see in the credits, Falcon is Richard Doty right there in the credits. It was obvious if you know who Doty is. Many of you, for some reason, the UFO field still likes to interview him. So silly. This all goes back to that credibility in that paper about the UFO conspiracies and stuff. But yeah, people still interview and take him seriously for some reason, but these were all lies. This was a disinformation. If Doty is telling the truth, and I don't know that he is, if Doty was telling the truth and he started to do this at the behest of his boss, he said that he did this because there was an engineer or a actual a vendor of theirs who was providing technical equipment who lived near Kirtland Air Force Base. His office was right there, actually, and he was recording videos and getting signals from the base. He thought they were aliens and UFOs, but according to Doty, he was actually recording stuff from top secret projects that they were doing. So in order to throw him off, they made him believe that in UFOs and aliens, he was actually entrenched with the UFO community. So he was spreading this stuff out to the UFO community. Doty also brought someone, and he lied about this. Linda Howe to Kirtland Air Force Base, gave her a bunch of disinformation. She believes this really wild stuff about Jesus being an alien and stuff that he gave her is real. But he often denies that he ever did this, gave her this information, but sometimes he doesn't. He changes his story on a regular basis. But my point being is, why did this OSI agent, active OSI agent for many, many years during the 80s, actively put out disinformation, and then immediately after he retires goes on this television show and shares all this BS with people? How could he get away with this? How could the Air Force not have known, and how could he have gotten away with it? And then if, of course, he was doing this as an official project, well, then he was committing crimes for the government. This is a big deal, but this is another area that they can look into. So there's stuff there to write about disinformation with the government we do know about without getting into crazy conspiracy stuff that is not verified. And I've got, by the way, FOIA documents and everything documenting everything that I said. You can find it on the website. Here's just a little bit of information. This is that article that the CIA wrote that I was talking about. You can find it on the CIA website, but this is a direct quote from it. When they're talking about the U2 disinformation, this led the Air Force to make misleading and deceptive statements to the public in order to allay public fears and to protect an extraordinarily sensitive national security project. Of course, the U2 project. But they lied. It's right there in literally black and white. And this is what's funny, too, because the U2 aircraft was painted silver. So no wonder it was reflecting, way up there in the sky. And it was flying at about like twice as high as commercial aircraft were flying at the time. So it was way up there. They no longer painted them silver. Soon after the testing, they started painting them matte black so they wouldn't be reflective. Is there a there? I'll go over this possibility really quickly, meaning well, Alejandro, is there even something to the UFO mystery? I believe that there is. I think most of you listening probably believe that there probably is. I don't know for sure. I can't prove it, but that's what we're seeking to do. But what are the possibilities? Remember, there's more than aliens when it comes to possibilities. Even with exotic possibilities, it could be aliens, could be people from the future. There's a professor at Montana Tech who has written a book and talks about this, and he's done research to justify his or to buttress, his argument. Other dimensions, there's actually a lot of scientists who feel there's, more of a probability that we can travel interdimensionally than travel vast distances in space. So that could be it. There's this inside the earth kind of theory that there's people coming from the earth. So these are the kind of the fringy exotic ones, and not so exotic. I've had a ball scientist, a ball lightning scientist on the show. Some of you might have heard a few months ago, about a year ago, ball lightning as this phenomena of these balls of orbs of light that fly around during lightning storms for about 10 to 20 seconds. So it's a phenomena that has been observed but has not been proven. Earth lights, this is a phenomena that can be reproduced in a lab where, earth or granite is kind of smashed together and these little plasma orbs come off of it. So that's another phenomena. Everything on this list, though, not one of these things have been scientifically confirmed. Not one. So any of these things could be the possibility. The low-hanging fruit, of course, is the ball lightning and the earth lights, which we have more kind of data for that they would be real. And that's what I think is really exciting. This work can help prove that there's some scientific validity to this work if we can help these people working on these areas to prove their point. But nothing on this page has been confirmed. So how do we do that? We need to do that. Well, NASA put together a UAP study group, and this group was just to give an advice to NASA on whether or not to take on UAP and how to move forward if you do. Their conclusion in their last paper was the study of unidentified anomalous phenomena presents a unique scientific opportunity that demands a rigorous evidence-based approach. I agree with that 100%. So they're saying that UAP should be investigated, and we should do it from an evidence-based approach, not hearsay, not videos that are being misrepresented or misinterpreted. And I'm not saying maliciously, but just they're not demonstrating what we're being told is in the video, namely that FLIR Tic Tac. We don't know that object was a Tic Tac. They also recommended a strategy that encourages citizen analysis of UAP data that would bring an element of transparency to the field that could help combat biases, preconceived skepticism, and mistrust of authority. I absolutely agree. And I think we all agree that this needs to be transparent. Science is mostly and best done when it is transparent. Why? When you say that, science is done in secret. No, you can't. It's difficult to do science in secret. Even if you listen to my interview with one of Bigelow's lead scientists, Eric Davis, he talked about doing science in a black project is really difficult because you can't work with other scientists. And when you're doing science, you have to rely on the expertise of many other people with different disciplines. And you can't do that if they're not read into the program. So not a lot of real science can be done on black projects. It makes it very difficult. And that's why that, coupled with that, there needs to be a consensus. In order to prove something scientifically, you just don't do it in your little lab in a corner. You write a paper, and then the scientific community needs to look it over and bash it and try to come to a consensus on whether or not what you're writing is valid. So it needs to be done in a community. So science, the way NASA does it, science, the way science is done best, is transparent. And that's why this realm is what's most important. So this is where I full-heartedly believe we need to go. You and I can get involved with this right now. Enigma's an example. You can download this free app and you can upload videos and reports right now. And then my job is to look at those, to recommend the best ones to people. But on the back end, I'm also getting those to scientists to hopefully get them to investigate these cases, write papers on them, and then get those out to the scientific community so we can get a scientific consensus. That's what we need to do, and that's what we can all work on. Other groups out there, MUFON is doing that, the Mutual UFO Network. It's kind of the largest kind of civilian group that kind of has boots on the ground doing this kind of work. New Fork is a website that collects sightings. So these are all the groups collecting sightings. Then we have Galileo doing the both, really. Galileo, like we talked about earlier, putting together suites of sensors to try to gather data from the UAP to figure out what's going on with them. But they need the information from the other groups to know where to put those things. They've even asked us, where are the UFOs? Where should we put our devices? So we all need to work together on that. The Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, that was the group that I've been a part of and a board member. I was a founding member, and I've been with them since the get-go. But, we've collected scientists to analyze the data out there. And the SU has put together papers or helped in the creation of papers. You could go to their website and find those papers. I know I'm forgetting others, like the UAPX has done something similar as Galileo. That's an organization gathering data. The UAP Data Acquisition Project. And I love these guys because what they're doing is they're putting together systems like that Galileo Dalek system that we looked at earlier. But these are systems you could purchase and you could deploy at your house. You could put one of these up. So I love UFODAP, the UFO Data Acquisition Project. So I think that's really important because then we can have people all over the planet putting up these systems, getting sensor data, and what I mean by that is video, cameras that have higher spectrum that can get video that is not visible, FLIR, things that are gathering temperatures, radiation, all of these different types of systems. And some of the people out there have been like, well, we need to state what is the scientific threshold to be able to prove something is anomalous. And that, I think, to me, is those people don't understand science. That's not how science works. You can't say, we have something unknown out there. I need you to write a paper to tell me what we need to look for and what is my goal to prove to you that it's real. Well, we don't know. If it's unknown, we don't know the nature of the phenomena at all. We need to start putting out these sensor systems in order to figure out what are the sensors that hit when a UAP flies over. If you get one for real, something that is demonstrating anomalous behavior, not all your sensor systems are going to go off. It might not be any unique temperature. Maybe the temperature is the same temperature as, the ambient air, but we're getting a weird type of radiation reading. That means we need to look at that radiation, and then that threshold is going to be based off of radiation readings along with maybe some other like sensor data like video or something. Or if it's something that creates heat, it is hot, we're getting higher temperature readings when these things are around. But we're not getting radiation. Well, then we need to look at the temperature aspect. We don't know enough information to do. A lot of people feel like, oh, they're changing the goalposts. Nobody's changing any goalposts. We're just making better plays. We're getting further down the field, but we're not even close to being able to kick a field goal. So to say the goalpost is being moved is just the wrong perspective. What we need to do is keep gathering data because we don't have enough information to say what those thresholds are. Science is the study of anomalous things, and there's many different manifestations because there's so much out there that the data can take. So we've got to gather data before we can get to that. And then finally, I have here UAP Discovery. So that's the new 501c I've created. I've created it for doing what I do, gathering those videos and data. And this group is specifically focused on gathering data using sensor systems and then doing that analysis. So it's crowdsourcing data and crowd analyzing that data to get that to scientists to hopefully find those needles in the haystack so that we can get that verification. And I think this is the common ground. This is what we all want, whether you're really fringy, whether you're saying, hey, aliens are here and I'm being abducted. Well, I'm working to prove that then. We're all working to prove that by gathering this data and then getting that analyzed. If that's not happening and it's something else, well, then we'll show that with the data. The point is that all of us want to know, right? And so all of us all of us benefit from this. And we don't have to necessarily, maybe you're not interested in the scientific investigation of this. That's fine. You don't have to get involved or even pay attention. But we don't need to fight and call each other names. We can have a space where it's very inclusive, where we're all working positively together with NASA, with Aero, with the debunkers, with everybody. And that's the plan. That's what UAP discovery is all about. This is just a picture on the left of kind of a Galileo system where they were putting, and this is extraordinary to me. So this is a bunch of UFO hunting sensors on the top of a building at Harvard. Who would have imagined 10 years ago that Harvard University would have all this UFO hunting stuff on it? On the right are the UFO DAP type of systems where you could purchase and put those together. I want to also encourage kids and students at universities and high schools to kind of do the work to put these together too, and aid them. And that's what UAP Discovery is about, where we can all get together and do this sort of thing and gather this data and hopefully solve this mystery. I think that we all together then solve this mystery. I think that all of us together doing this sort of work have the best chance at discovering something. And I argue, I love SETI. I'm all for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. But what have they gotten so far? Nothing. They haven't gotten anything. But I think people argue it's a worthwhile effort. So I think what we want to do, looking closer to home for not just aliens, but other sort of anomalous phenomena, is even just as valid, if not even more valid effort. So I think it's worthwhile to look. It's fun. It's interesting. And I think it can even get students and people more interested in science. So that's why I love this. That's why I created UAP Discovery. I think it's the type of space that even NASA can be comfortable with. And to be honest, it's a model for what NASA could be doing to help in this area. But with the state of the DoD and the cuts and everything, I don't know that we're going to get anything or movement on any of that anytime soon. But this is kind of the focus, my focus, and the tenor and perspective that you will be getting on this show. I know it's a niche type of thing, and if it's not your cup of tea, that's fine. But, I want to make some real headway. I don't want to sit around listening to stories that never can be proven. I've done that for a very long time. I'm way past that. It's time to get evidence and prove this stuff. Speaking of data and evidence, it's time to look at some UFO cases. All right, let's take a look at these. So, this is a really fun one. Let me start this over. So this is new. We just got this. This was just taken April 16th. So just this morning, actually. That's how new this one is. Of course, this is going to air on the 17th, but I'm recording on the 16th. This is over Arlington, Texas. And what is that? So we've got these blinking lights, kind of a square configuration, beaming this light down. What? That is a drone. And I learned this weekend from at MoveFund from some former law enforcement and others that, this is kind of a common thing these days, that the law enforcement are flying around drones and they do have lights that can shine down like that. This is good to know because, let's see if we can get a little more of that. But this is good to know because I was recently on a PBS special, PBS Nova, where they were looking at some of our Enigma cases. And on that show, we showed this one here, this weird one from July 3rd. This was actually Elwood, Pennsylvania. And in this object, you see this object come into the screen, just this light. And then later on, it beams this very strong light down. This is from July 3rd. Let's see if I can get that beam part again. But it's beaming this light down. And I think this probably was a law enforcement drone now. I wasn't sure what it was before, but it probably was a law enforcement drone. And it would make sense that they're checking out fireworks on July 3rd. You know, who the heck is out there shooting off these fireworks? And then it slowly moves away later. So that was probably, so this is a unknown for me that is solved. Maybe some of you out there are like, duh, I always knew it was a drone. I wasn't sure. And you know what? That's fine. A lot of times I'll post some of these videos and people will be like, you idiot, that's a drone, or that's this, or that's that. And then I look at it and like, okay, it looks like you're right. It's okay. I think, you know, we got to quit beating each other up for stuff like that. It's okay to post something that you don't know. The congressional definition for a UAP is something that is not immediately identifiable. And these were not, some of these are not immediately identifiable to me. Maybe they are to you. A lot of people agree with me when I show these videos and they're like, wow, that does look weird. But that's part of the learning process. So I think we need to make a space where we're not embarrassed. And I'm not going to be embarrassed to post something that I don't know what it is, because I know if someone does figure out what it is, then I'm going to be educated on that. Now I'm going to know going forward. And that's what's important. That's what analysis is. So that's that one. So here are a couple more from this year. And this is a really weird one to me. This was from January. And look at this. So this guy says he sees a blinking light. He zooms in. Probably a plane. I don't know that that light's interesting. And then look at those two things shoot up in the air there together. Maybe birds, probably birds, but pretty weird video. It's pretty short, so here they'll come again. Here we go. Look at that. So they come together and shoot up in the air and boom, they go away. That's pretty weird. You think that's birds? Kind of strange if it is, but I guess it could be. I like that video. That's kind of strange. This is from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on January 11th. But then a more recent one is this one. I really like this. This is from Jones, Oklahoma, April 8th. But this person got like 3 or 4 videos, and there are multiple objects like this. And you see this object come in, fade away, and that's what this one is. Come in, fade away. And they put another post out with a couple more videos that are similar, but with more objects doing this, fading in and fading out. So he said over the night, he saw several objects with doing this behavior. Now, if this was from an aircraft, I would say it was SpaceX, because SpaceX looks like this, pretty much exactly like that from an aircraft. You know, it's a racetrack phenomena. I interviewed Ben Hansen last year about these. He's a researcher who investigated these, and in their investigation, they figured out these were Starlink. But I don't know that they can manifest like that from the ground. So we'll have to get more people looking at that. But that's pretty weird, I think. Don't know what that one is. So I'll put the links to these, of course, in the bottom so you can check those out yourselves. But what the heck could that be? I don't know. Here's another video where the same type of thing's going on. Yeah, I'm just not sure. Even to kind of speculate, a bunch of drones, you know, Chinese lanterns they fade and float up in a while, but you see them lit and going, they're lit the whole time, not fading in and out. So I don't know what that one is. Pretty weird. Some good videos. So we will review, and again, you know, these are just unknown. There's no doubt. And just so you know, I expect when I post these videos, I expect that somebody somewhere is going to be able to figure out what they are. I do not expect that, you know, all of these videos are aliens or that, you know, these are proof of something anomalous going on. But I think that they're worth looking into because they could be. And I am not a scientist. I'm not a physicist. And so I, from experience, don't know which of these videos is really going to excite a scientist where they're going to look at that and say, you know what, I can analyze that and really figure something out with that one. And that's what's exciting, is to give them that sort of data to work with. And that's the whole point, is crowdsourcing data and then getting that analyzed. So I'll bring to you in the future when some of these are resolved, just like that drone one that we looked at a little earlier, that I think now is that the law enforcement drone. So we'll check those out. That is it for this week's show. Thank you all so much for joining me. Stay tuned for more. I hope that you enjoyed this. We'll have interviews going on, so it's just not me blabbing away in the future. Of course, these are posted on YouTube also, if you want to see the videos that I had posted. But thank you all so much for joining me again on the podcast. I think that the time is right. There's a lot of wild kind of stuff going on out there in this field, but I think the time is right to take a new, sober examination of this. I think hopefully people did get snagged by some of the information that did not turn out to be accurate, but was exciting, that got a lot of people into taking another look at UFOs, and then getting the Congress and NASA and DOD to say, yeah, UAP are a real deal. We should take them seriously. And that's what we're doing here on this show. We're taking all of this seriously, taking a hard, skeptical, grounded, sober look at all of this information, not lying to ourselves or sensationalizing, to really try to figure out what is there, and to investigate and hopefully finally come to some resolution or make some novel, interesting discoveries when it comes to the UAP phenomena. Thank you all for joining. Until next time, adios, muchachos.